Elden Ring, Armored Core 6, Shadow of the Erdtree, and now Night Rain. How, against all odds, in our gaming industry is Fromsoftware able to put out 4 big projects in the span of 4 years? Especially since before Elden Ring, their last released project was Sekiro, released in 2019. I mean, Fromsoftware made such a good DLC expansion that the Game Awards actually switched up on if DLCs, expansion packs, and remakes are eligible for Game of the Year. They literally switched up the whole system because of Shadow of the Erdtree. And what's really funny is Shadow of the Erdtree didn't even win any awards. The head of Larian Studios, Sven Vinke, had a great speech summarizing how game studios are able to do this. They're able to make good games at quality levels far surpassing the rest of the industry, and that are able to sell well.
So it turns out that not only will I be the one who will know as first which game wins tonight, but I actually also know which game is going to win next year, the year after, and the year after. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost. Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to serve as a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear being laid off if they didn't meet those targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design.
As of June 2024, 423 employees work at Fromsoftware creating the games that we have been playing, like Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, Armored Core 6, and next year a game that I'm highly anticipating, Night Rain. Like what Sven said, Fromsoftware is creating games that they want to play. They aren't creating games in worries that shareholders are going to get mad, that they won't be meeting targets. They're actually increasing the wages for employees from 260,000 yen to 300,000 in April. And I think it's like understated how many game studios actually don't do that. You don't see Activision increasing wages, you don't see Xbox increasing wages, you don't see Sony increasing wages, you don't see EA increasing wages or Bethesda. None of these companies are increasing wages because they don't have the success and respect to these developers. The last few times I've seen developers increase wages have been Capcom, have been FromSoft, and I think have been Atlas, the studios on the eastern side, because they respect their developers. They know that you need developers to create these games. You need to have good wages, so they want to work, they have that creative ambition and freedom, and they also are able to make what they want to make. They want to play the game they're making. And unfortunately for game studios like EA, like Activision, like Sony, like Xbox, it got lost along the way. I understand completely, a lot of these studios under those companies are making great games. The last Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was a big hit, especially for quality levels. Xbox is starting to release some pretty big games next year with like Avowed, Outer Worlds 2, Doom, Fable, and South of Midnight. Sony is kind of itching back into more exclusives like Intergalactic, and we even have EA. They're also still releasing games with Hazelight as well, with Split Fiction coming out in March. But all 4 of those publishers have also had layoffs in the industry, most recently as well, at least from my understanding, with Xbox, laying off people when they acquired Activision Blizzard, which, understandable, you can't really have 2 people doing one job, but they also had more layoffs again when they shut down Tango, when they shut down Arcane, when they shut down Roundhouse and AlphaDog. They fired all those people to meet a bottom line instead of placing a bet on them and making sure that, look, they're going to produce a good game that's going to earn us enough money to keep them open. The people at the top of these companies, like Phil Spencer, like now we had their new person at Sony, Herman Hulst, they're more worried about the bottom line for those companies. And understandably, your CEO, the business is making money. But when you put something like an art form that is video games behind the profit that comes out of it, you've just doomed that studio. We've seen it with Activision Blizzard. They've most recently been using AI in their zombies mode. Instead of hiring an employee to just draw a picture, they would rather just use AI generated images, which just pisses people off even further.
They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit. And they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted in function of a bonus or politics.
Developers that earn Game of the Year, that win awards like Best Narrative, Best Game Design, all of those awards that get millions of copies sold, Make the games that people want to play, make games that are fun, make games that they want to play, make games with good game design. They don't force down microtransactions, they don't use AI generated art when they just received $5 billion from their last game release, and they can as easily just hire a contract artist to make them up some little Santa art for their next big battle pass that's going to make them another $500 million. They make the video game that they want to play, and I know I'm using From Software here as a massive example, and there are plenty of other big studios like Larian, like I'd argue Atlas, even RGG is an example, the studio that creates the Like of Dragon games. Those games are fantastic, heavily reused on the assets form, but they still make great games. I am using From Software as an example because they have recently increased wages for their employees because they are putting out a game every single year. I know Shadow of the Erdtree isn't really considered a game, but the size of it alone, I would consider it to be a game. Now, it's actually a DLC expansion. You do have to play some of the original game of Elden Ring to play the expansion, so of course it is still a DLC, but the size of the DLC makes up for that saying. And then for them to also come out and make an entirely new co-op, kind of like survival Elden Ring game that's 3-player, like, the quality level and also the amount of games that they're producing is insane. Like, build off the Elden Ring IP. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an Elden Ring project in 2026 or 2027, or if we saw a completely new game. The quality level from Software is insane, and I'm heavily expecting it to continue, and I'm also expecting them to also be increasing their wages of employees if they do considerably make more money with the coming years. I do not want to see Bandai Namco, or whatever the publisher or head is, or Katakawa, start screwing them over and start forcing down microtransactions, because that's the way the industry's going. They're creating good video games, let them do that. It's also no secret that Sony does have an intent to purchase the From Software parent company, Katakawa, which means that they would own Elden Ring, they would own Dark Souls, they would own all of the IP that could be releasing over the next few years. Could they make it exclusive? Maybe. Would we see the next Elden Ring game after Night Rain on Xbox? We don't know. They could completely screw over this company and just do what Sony does, like they did with Concord, and I know that's a completely different situation, but with their recent happenings and how they've been handling their studios, I don't have a lot of faith in Sony if they do intend to own From Software, unless they just let them do their thing and just let them produce money, because that is exactly what From Software would do. Let them do what they want, they will make the game that will make you a ton of money. But then there's also the question of the culture of the studio changing now that they're a part of Sony, and so many other questions. Would Sony keep increasing wages for that company if they do see higher success? I don't think I've seen Sony do that before. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I have no idea. But it would not be surprising to me if they started to lay off From Software employees as well, just to cut costs on this acquisition, because it's no secret that, yeah, PlayStation's selling consoles, but they also do have a big money dump that is also Bungie with their $3 billion they put into that company that I'm sure they're still pretty pissed about. And I'm not even sure if From Software would be able to actually get into the meeting room with Katakawa and Sony and argue terms on if games should be exclusive, on how layoffs could occur if the company doesn't do well with certain projects. We don't know. Unless you know, and you can correct me down in the comments below once again, but I am worried for From Software if this does happen. And this is all leading back to the situation of Xbox shutting down 4 big studios now that they also own Activision Blizzard and the majority of ZeniMax. I mean, we've seen that they're completely fine with Activision Blizzard using AI in their games. I know Xbox and Microsoft are really pushing AI in their next console and in all of their devices, but using AI generated art is something that's a big no-no with the majority of just the world.
They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun. And they realized that if the developers didn't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. They understood the value of respect, that if they treated their developers and players well, those same developers and players would forgive them when things didn't go as planned. But above all, they cared about their game because they loved games. It's really that simple.
That is the best speech that the gaming industry needs to hear right now. Treat your developers well, treat your players well, and the revenue will follow. It's that simple. Make a fun video game that the developers want to play and want to release to players in a good state with good gameplay mechanics and with people who actually enjoy creating video games instead of pushing in unnecessarily microtransactions and anything else that could affect the game in a negative way. And you will earn the revenue the gaming companies want, you will earn the profits that the people who make the spreadsheets want, and you will have a fan base that will back you till the end of time. Like I said earlier, many more studios other than From Software do follow this, like Larian Studios of Sven Vincke, he did give this speech, and plenty of other studios. I would even argue CD Projekt Red have really can't come back after Cyberpunk 2077's whole debacle, I really loved Phantom Liberty massively. I really feel like that was the turning point for the game, where they said, look, here it is, here's what we wanted the game to be day one, enjoy this expansion that we're giving you. It was massive. I really loved it. That is the type of quality that we need from these gaming studios, not the shit that Activision is pulling currently, or that Xbox is pulling, or that Sony's pulling, EA's pulling, ZeniMax, Bethesda. All these other big gaming publishers and studios under these huge corporations are pulling. We need the smaller base studios, like the Fromsoftwares, even though I know they're owned by Kadokawa, like the Larian Studios. We need those studios to be able to make the games that we still play to this day. Because the rest of the industry, unless they fall in line with where it's going, of where the revenue is leaving, then they're just going to be fucked. But that is all I wanted to talk about in this video. If you did enjoy and want to see more videos like this one, consider leaving a like, sharing, commenting, and subscribing if you so choose to. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.